Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this track. Really focusing this afternoon on business enablement, talking a bit about security, a bit about some of the fundamentals underlying it, but really talking about how we can leverage mobile, how we can use it to derive some business benefit and to help with our business processes. So maybe a slightly different slant on an approach to a sort of typical sort of MDM type approach. So my name is Ian Wills. I manage Entrust's public sector business in the UK, working with organisations such as the NHS. We provide the smart cards for the NHS spine, and then moving into spine 2. We work with HMRC to secure their online portal for self-assessment tax returns, VAT submissions, and so on. And Entrust, more broadly, really focuses on securing digital identities and information. So we are the number 2 provider of SSL certificates in the market, for example. So if any of you want to talk about SHA-1 and what Google are doing around that area, then please come and talk to us. We're seeing a lot of interest given the recent announcements by Google. And we are now also part of Datacard Group, who are the biggest manufacturer in terms of printers for financial cards. So about 90% of the financial cards, credit cards, debit cards, go through Datacard printers. So I guess the theme here is that Entrust is very much focused on securing electronic identity, which is what we're talking about today. Datacard Group is very much focused on securing physical identity, physical passports, and physical banking cards. So that's what we bring. We bring expertise around securing identity in both the logical and the physical space. Just to give you some context of where we're coming from. So just a fairly brief agenda this afternoon. Just want to touch on the current landscape and talk about the various different dynamics that we're seeing to sort of frame the proposition that I'm going to go on to after that. Emotive question, are mobile devices secure? A little bit of a rhetorical question, but I'll give you my view on that. And then moving on to how can we leverage mobile devices to strengthen identity. In some ways, it's interesting coming here 2 days after the Apple announcement 2 days ago, where they gave a really good example of how mobile can strengthen identity. So let's maybe use that as an example as well. Then we'll talk about some use cases. So can we have a full-featured digital identity on a mobile device? What would that look like? How does it work? And we're actually seeing that that's happening now, and that's actually being built into standards within North America, within the government space. And that's a great indicator of where the market is going more widely. And then we can look at some other example use cases. And hopefully I'll have time to give you a demonstration as well. It's always nice to sort of see what this sort of thing might look like. So I'll crack on. Current landscape. So would anybody argue with the statement that passwords are not secure? Anyone think they're really good and, yeah, top security, totally covered? You may have noticed, I just did another search this morning on the latest in terms of breaches. Obviously there was the iCloud breach earlier in the week. The Information Commissioner's Office, they tend to report about 400 data security breaches every quarter. So that's over 100 a month. As a run rate, that was through 2013, as a run rate example. So data breaches are very common, and weak passwords is a big part of that. Another part of that is that the threat landscape is growing as well. So the threats are becoming far more targeted and far more advanced in technology. Not that they always need to be. A lot of fairly simple attacks can be quite successful. And you'll have seen the Target, the Home Depot, PSN. I mean, I don't really have to educate you on data breaches. But it's important for us to consider what attacks are out there when we're putting in place defences against those attacks. What I guess is focused on, to a lesser extent, is user experience, because we need to remember that we need to defend against these attacks and we need to strengthen security. But we need to do that in a way which is going to be acceptable to our users, whether they are enterprise employees or our customers. And that's because users are getting used to a better user experience with their mobile devices, and they're demanding that when they use your systems as employees of your companies or as customers. So is it easy to type a password on a mobile device? Not really, not a great user experience. Can you raise your hand if you love your one-time password hardware token? Is that something that fills you with joy whenever you use it? Are these things that you find give you a great user experience? I've got one here. We make these, so I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot a little bit, but are these the best way of doing security? Yeah, maybe not. So we need to think very much front and centre about user experience, and I think the Googles and the Apples of the world are driving that agenda, and that's not going to change. Now, this is complicated by things you might have heard of, cloud. So cloud means that the service you're accessing is no longer within the confines of your organisation. So take these problems and multiply them. And also mobile. How do you make your services available on mobile? More and more people are accessing in that way. So these really accelerate the problem and make it more complex. So that's my quick whirlwind tour of how I see the landscape of what we're facing as information security professionals in my industry. And I think there's one theme here that we see, is that all of these attacks, and that this is an alphabet soup of acronyms, MIPMO, ZIPMO, keylogging, DNS poisoning. All of these attacks are around compromising your identity. Be that your iCloud login so that we can steal photos, be that your bank account details so that we can go and get your money, be that your corporate login to remote access so I can go and pinch your intellectual property and your company's value. These are all around stealing your identity, which is why a username password is not a great barrier against that. So this is why we at Entrust really focus on protecting the identity first and foremost. That then unlocks a lot of the use cases and puts you in a much better posture going forward. So before I talk about mobile security, what do you think is the best device for online banking? You're doing your online banking, you have a choice. I've limited it a little bit. Maybe Chromebook will be there next year. But who thinks a PC is the safest of those four things in terms of PC, Mac, iOS device or Android? Who thinks a PC is the safest device to use for banking? Yeah? Okay. Who thinks a Mac? So Mac is a bit safer than PC, okay? Who thinks an iPad or an iPhone? Okay. And who thinks an Android device or a tablet? So nobody does their banking on an Android phone or an Android tablet. And who think, just as interest, who thinks something else? What, is something I've missed? Is something else that you use for your banking?
It's all depends. You're right to them when you go there and you actually.
That's why I put the word on. But I agree. I mean, the risk is that if this isn't working, customers will just walk into the branch. Yeah? And that's bad for the banks. And I've used banking because it's very personal, but this could be accessing any sensitive information. Okay, I wanted to understand what sort of challenge I have with my next slide before I moved on to it. So now I've got an idea. Trying to change perceptions a little bit. Oh, that surprised me. Okay. Resume the slideshow. Right, okay. So, are mobile devices secure? So this is a rhetorical question. You can't just say yes or no. It's more complex than that. What I would say is that mobile devices have a lot of features that lend themselves to being an aid in terms of security and identity. So one example I would give is if you look at a Windows PC or a Mac, it's very easy for any malware on that system to bind itself to any process, any program running on that system, such that if you download a PDF or an email which has got malware in it, it can very easily move itself into any other process on your system. So it can read any keystrokes you type because it can bind itself to Windows Explorer, which is your desktop. It can intercept any information you type into a web browser. So if you think, I'll use Firefox for general web browsing and I'll use IE for banking, that's not really going to help you because any malware you download through one browser can hook itself to any process running on your system. It's wide open, and that's by design. That allows you to do things like update Windows without rebooting. because they can hook processes and they can change things on the fly. So, and also there's a degree of backward compatibility there as well. Windows is quite an old operating system, and therefore these features have to sort of remain for a period of time based on an architecture that isn't necessarily very new. And Macs are the same. There's no difference in terms of the architecture there. Within a mobile device, this is a much newer architecture, and there is the concept of a sandbox in which each application runs. So each application is limited in how it can communicate with other applications. And in fact, you need to have subscribed communication routes between applications. So it's possible to write an application which can't be interfered with by any other applications running on the device. Now, there are some caveats to this. So there are some shared resources on mobile devices. Things like your photos, your calendar, your SMS messages, and your photos. So those things are shared, and any application, especially on Android, if you install any application, it asks you basically to be able to go into your house at night and be able to take your car for a drive, and it just wants access to a lot of information on your device, and it actually lists what it needs. So there are aspects of mobile devices that are not secure against malware. But a well-written application, there are no known attacks that can jump from a malware-infected application into a well-written application on a mobile device. So I'm happy to, maybe there'll be a question about that a bit later on. Another aspect of a mobile device is it's a much more personal device. Mine's in my pocket or right next to me, as opposed to my PC, which is over in the corner. So there's a very much a proximity. I know where it is. I don't leave it at home. It's more personal to me. I look after it in that way. I may lend my corporate badge to a visitor to go and get in and out the office to go to the bathroom, but maybe I wouldn't do that with my phone because it's got my data on it and it just doesn't feel very good. So I think that there's some social reasons why mobile devices are more secure as well. If you look at government guidance, the CESG documents are actually quite positive about mobile device security in terms of emphasising the sandboxing nature, emphasising the support of certificates for secure VPN and wireless access, and also things like secure boot, which you get in mobile devices. You don't automatically get that in Windows PCs. The mobile device also offers a way of authenticating out of band. So because it's not your PC, it lends itself to a nice authentication mechanism to support securing PC applications. And that's what I'll demonstrate later on, how that might work. So how could we leverage a device to boost your identity, to strengthen your identity in a way that's easy to use, cost effective, and secure? So there's a number of different examples. We can put certificates on devices. They can be provisioned directly from an authentication platform or pushed out through a mobile device management solution. That means that when devices connect to your Wi-Fi network, you can control that access, you can authenticate the devices. You're not left with sharing Wi-Fi passwords, which people can give to visitors. You're controlling access to your network. And that's true for VPN as well. We can also embed security within applications that we write ourselves. So I think we'll see a growth in home-written mobile applications, and that will then drive a demand to put security into those applications, because you can't really provide the rich personalized experience with access to data unless you know who it is on the other end of that communication. So we can also authenticate by SMS one-time password. The only caution I would give there is because malware can intercept your SMS messages and hide them from you, that's not the most secure way of doing authentication, but it is very cost effective. So a lot of enterprises do use SMS OTP, one-time password authentication, but we have seen attacks like Eurograbber, which have successfully attacked bank accounts and taken money from people based on SMS malware. E-grid, so a grid card, just like a battleship, randomly ask for coordinates off there, A1, B2, G3, when someone logs in. That's a great authenticator for partners or suppliers or customers where you want to keep the cost down but strengthen username password. That was used in the Olympics, for example, for authentication of contractors, where they actually put it out on a plastic card rather than a mobile device. But because it can be distributed electronically, again, it keeps costs really low. Not probably the best thing for enterprise use cases, but we need to think about authentication for all of our different stakeholders, and it's likely that you'll need to think about different solutions for different stakeholders based on security and cost. So then we get into, I guess more sort of stronger two-factor type authentication. So if I grab my lovely one-time password token, so we can actually take this, throw it in the bin, and replace it with an app on my mobile device. So this app, in this case, this is our app. It detects if the device is jailbroken. It won't run if the device is jailbroken. So one of my caveats is mobile secure. If you jailbreak your device, it's not secure. You've just disabled all the security features, so we won't run. But this is within its own sandboxed application, and nothing else can interfere with the running of this application. There's no attacks known about that have successfully done that, which is about all I can say as a security professional. But what we can also do, and one of the difficulties in using this, is when I'm logging in, I don't quite know what it is I'm authenticating to. So I might get a prompt saying, on my web browser saying, you're about to transfer some money, authenticate, type in the code from this. All I can do is trust the web page in front of me as to what I'm actually authenticating for. And as we know, and actually I think recent statistics, 1 in 5 PCs is infected with malware in the enterprise. So can I really trust what's on my browser screen, given everything I just told you about it being a free-for-all for malware? So what this does is, it out of band, it gives me not just the code to type in, but it tells me what it is I'm actually authenticating to, what I'm approving. That's really quite powerful. So if malware has changed anything on my browser screen, as soon as this comes through, I'll notice that, because suddenly I'll notice, oh, no, that's not my bank account. That's not the value I typed in. So that's quite powerful. And then what we're also seeing, the example I mentioned earlier, is actually turning your mobile phone into a smart card. So let's talk about that as well. A fully functioning digital ID, for signing, authentication, encryption, everything you can do with the smart card. So I hope you see there's a range of different things, different use cases, different technologies you can use on a mobile device to strengthen your identity for different costs, different functionality. So in terms of mobile application protection, if you're writing your own application, you want to make sure that when the user of that application accesses your services, how do you know who that user is? So we can now embed that within the application. And one of the challenges here is, how do you achieve security within a mobile app that you're writing yourself? The expertise and the skilled security developers for mobile are going to be pretty expensive. To actually buy somebody in who's got expertise in that area to make sure they can write the code securely, that's going to be quite expensive. So I think there's value there in being able to take an off-the-shelf SDK, put that into your application, and what that will do is it will either use a digital certificate to sign and authenticate, or it'll use a transparent and OTP. So very much like the one-time password on the device, but sent in the background without the user seeing it. And of course, when you're writing that application, you'd want to make sure that the user enters a PIN to get into there and unlock that application. So when I talk about, this is my one technical slide. I have to put a technical slide in here. When I talk about running a smart card on a mobile phone, this is architecturally what I'm talking about. So this here is a PIN applet, and it's the same applet that we put on our smart cards. So I've got a couple of examples here. This is a smart card we use internally to get into the building. It's got a nice grid card on the back for our Outlook web access. And this is if you want to see this later, come and find me. We've got a stand outside. This is a transparent version, so you can kind of see actually what's in one of these smart cards. There's like an antenna there for physical access, logical access, and so on. But the applet running on this chip is the same applet that's running here in a smartphone. And then underneath that, we build an emulation layer so that the application environment looks like a Java card OS, which means that you're then managing that identity through a smart card management system as you would with a smart card. In this case, it's based on the PIV standard coming out of North America. And what that gives you is it gives you automatic interoperability with a whole range of applications. So logging into Windows, authenticating to a VPN, but also physical access, getting into a door, and so on. So I would position this as being, I know it's really hard to predict the future, but this is sort of my best guess at the moment of how this is moving forward. There's a question here about how secure is this? Where are the keys stored here? And what was interesting a couple of days ago when Apple announced the iPhone 6 is they talked about something called a secure element. What that is it's a smart card chip on the phone. So now this architecture is as secure as a smart card with an iPhone 6, assuming that access to that secure element is available from this application. And Android devices have had secure elements as well in certain variants. So this is a very strong security model, and it's also based on well-supported industry standards. So what can you do with that? Back to the marketing slide. Well, you can get through your door in the morning, you can log into your PC, you can sign a document. I'll show you how that might work. And that could be signing a document on your PC, or just a pure mobile use case, just signing a mobile document. It can also be used for reading encrypted email, sending encrypted email. And we have integrations where that security architecture is embedded within applications from companies like Thursby. And then they provide mutual authenticated SSL, they provide email decryption based on those credentials. You can authenticate to cloud-based services. So with a username and password, if I want to log into a service, I have to send it my username and my password. So I'm giving away the things that prove who I am. That's why passwords are not great. With this sort of solution, you're actually signing a challenge, and actually you're not actually sharing your private key, which is the thing that you're authenticating with. So you're not giving the cloud service, in this case, the ability to impersonate you. That's quite powerful. And logging into VPN, remote access, and so on. I'll take a step back for a second. I think I need to talk a bit about how we manage this sort of environment. I think that's quite important. So I'm going to introduce the concept of an authentication platform. So an authentication platform is there to manage all the things I've just talked about, and also any other authenticators you might want to use. So that would include the hard tokens, because a lot of organisations still use hard tokens and want to use hard tokens because they know that and they feel that meets their needs. But it also offers flexibility in terms of integration with enterprise applications, VPNs and so on, APIs, SDKs, ways of talking to the authentication platform to prove who people are, and integrations with using things like Radius and so on. And also ease of use, so allowing that authentication platform to operate as an identity provider, so an IDP to other cloud-based services, allowing self-service to lower your costs of managing that if people forget passwords or want to request new software tokens and so on. Over-the-air enablement for mobile devices, so you haven't got to sort of keep plugging things into PCs and being bound to the enterprise and administration. So when I talk about an authentication platform, I'm talking about a single application, if you like, that can manage all of your authentication requirements for your customers, for your employees, and for your partners. So I thought I'd define that because on the next slide I've kind of got all platforms, so I like to define things I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about now is an example of a business process or a capability that can be unlocked using what I've discussed so far. So this is now talking about how can you get business benefit out of this sort of environment, this architecture. So this is a very horizontally applicable use case, digitally signing a document. This could be adding an employee to payroll. It could be the approval for any kind of internal corporate operation, signing an expense form. It could be transacting money. It could be anything the way you need an approval process, which typically might have needed someone to be in the office signing a bit of paper. So the actual data itself can be generated either in a browser, in a mobile device. We really don't mind how it's generated. Some kind of form is produced, and I think that can be quite flexible. And what's important here is that the web application that's serving that and gathering information from the user and then needs it to be signed can send that through an API call to an authentication platform. And then the authentication platform integrates directly with the mobile device to sign that data. So the benefit here is the user gets to see on their out-of-band device, potentially separate to the application, the device they're initiating the transaction on, details of what they're signing. And a user experience is simply entering a PIN to unlock the application, seeing what needs to be signed and saying yes, no, or actually this is something dodgy going on here, I'm concerned about this. Information is signed using PKI, this is strong enterprise security, sent back, and then can be stored, archived, used later. So a great example of, I've been with Entrust for over 15 years now, and to do this sort of thing 15 years ago was actually really hard. Do a PKI signature of data. It would need a smart card middleware, tens of megabytes of software on a Windows PC, a smart card reader, physical smart card, lots of bits and pieces, and it was a really quite advanced use case. Now all you need is an iPhone. I mean, this has really moved on hugely, unlocked by mobile technology. With an iPhone, is it as secure as a smart card? Probably not, no, not quite. It's getting there with secure elements, but it's a huge amount more secure than a username and password. It's a big step forward. So let me show you a demonstration of this technology. See if I can jump to a... Okay. Okay. Please talk amongst yourselves. My colleague Adrian Walker is sitting in the front. Oh, it's rebooting. Oh. Okay. If somebody wants to... my video seems to have broken the computer.
In which case, depends on what.
Sorry? So you try these things before and... Is that one? So I'll give you some statistics while we wait. I mentioned that Information Commission's Office 400 breaches per quarter. In terms of malware, and the reason I've talked a bit about malware is that there was a study last year. 90% of organisations surveyed, this was a Kaspersky survey, 90% underestimated the volume of malware being produced. Anybody, any idea of how many malware variants are produced every day? Any guesses?
Hundreds of thousands. But the issue is, of course, how many actually get into the public domain and how many actually are attacking systems. Because your antivirus companies will say, look what we found, and look what we've got. They take information from some. The reality is, what is the real threat out there to commerce from viruses? And it's not necessarily as great as what the AV companies want to think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. So the figure I've got is 200,000 variants a day. If you dilute that down, I think it's still a problem. I think our view on the antivirus market, and I think this is actually agreed to by the antivirus vendors as well, is that they can't keep up with that. They can't produce 200,000 signatures a day. And that's a problem. So you've got a lot of zero-day, a lot of malware, because it's increasingly targeted and it's very easy to produce new variants. So antivirus isn't necessarily going to always help catch this malware. And actually, they said only 6% of organisations recognise the serious impact of malware. 6%. And they said particularly enterprise data and identities. So I think people tend to think malware, financial fraud, but people weren't really thinking about malware in terms of intellectual property theft. And I know that's from going to various government briefings, that's what keeps GCHQ up at night. UK business, intellectual property going overseas. Right, let's see if this works. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is an attempted session riding attack. So this is, I'll keep pausing it to sort of explain what's going on. So on the right-hand side, this is just a standard web browser. Doesn't really matter what this is. And the user is going to log into their bank. And actually, all the user is going to do in this demo is log into their bank. On the left-hand side is, in this case, it's an iPhone, and they're going to use that to identify themselves to their bank. And the bank, in this case, is always also using the mobile channel as a transaction verification service as well. So if this user does anything on their account in terms of above a certain threshold of transaction, then the bank will actually use this identity to verify that transaction with the user. So that's kind of the setup. So the first thing and the main thing about the login, I think, to stress is the user experience. So I'm used to a user experience where you enter a user ID, maybe 3 characters of a password, maybe a number as well. It's quite a painful thing logging into your bank a lot of the time, and there's good reasons for that. They want to make sure it's secure. All I've typed in to the web browser is my user ID. Okay, click login. Now the rest of the authentication is going to be handled through this mobile device. So you see what's happened is there's already been a notification pop up saying you've got a security challenge. So I've typed in a username. This application is protected by a PIN. So even if the device isn't, the application is protected by a PIN. When the application launches, it checks if the device is jailbroken. If it is, then it won't run. So the user has to enter a 4-digit PIN. And that then unlocks their identity within that application. And the application is now, what's happened in the background is that this application has created an SSL session back to the bank servers, and it has retrieved some information, and that information is from the bank saying, what am I actually agreeing to at this point in time? And all it says is that the user and the username wants to authenticate to access the bank. So it's a login operation. So, yep, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to say confirm, which is the green button. I've logged into my bank. So a username and a 4-digit PIN, and I've logged into the bank using an out-of-band authentication mechanism. And actually there's a signed copy of that, so the bank can then prove that I logged in later on, great for audit records and so on. So what's happening now is that we're assuming that this computer here is infected by malware. The malware has been sitting waiting for me to log into this particular bank, and now it's going to try and steal some money from me. Now I've authenticated using a very strong authentication mechanism. And I could have used a one-time password token or SMS. And if I'd done that, then the fact that this secure session exists would allow this malware to do whatever it likes with my account. It can just ride on that authenticated session. But in this case, the bank's got transaction verification turned on, which means that what I see as a user, the web browser hasn't changed, haven't done anything, just looking at my account, deciding what to do next. On my phone, I have a new security challenge that's popped up. So I click on that, enter my PIN, prove my identity. It goes to the bank, and it polls the bank and gets over the secure session information about what's going on. And apparently, I've asked it to transfer $15,000 from my account to somebody else's account. So I can really not trust anything that I see over this side. This can be completely compromised with malware. 1 in 5 computers are, according to a recent survey. But I can trust what's on here. This is within a sandboxed application with a secure connection to my bank. And this is clearly not something I want to do, so I can, in this case, click the concern button, which means that transaction will be not completed. It will be alerted to the bank that there's been a security violation, and then the bank can actually go back to that individual and say, maybe you want to think about cleaning your computer up and getting rid of any malware that's on it. Within the application, there's a whole history of what's happened in the past and so on. So that's a really difficult attack to beat. And I come from a company who sells two-factor authentication solutions. And most of the two-factor authentication solutions we sell would have no way of preventing that attack. And that's just a fact. So yes, two-factor is very good, but in terms of those malware attacks, that's not going to protect you. So this is a great example. Right, let's see where I was. Okay, so just want to wrap up. So a lot of the data I've been mentioning and the flow of the argument I've been walking you through in terms of security of mobile devices versus PCs, opportunity to use mobile devices to strengthen your identity, that's actually within a report. We've got copies of that report on the table that we've got outside. So please feel free to stop by and pick up a copy of the Why Mobile is the Next Digital Identity report. It references a lot of external data, and it gives a very nice flow of the cases and the argument, and a good balanced view of the current environment. So that's appealing to your intellectual interest in the subject matter. To just appeal to your materialistic desires, we're giving away a Chromecast. So you've got a reasonably good chance of winning that if you put your business card into our bucket, and we'll make the draw at about 10 to 4 this afternoon near the end of the last break. If you don't know what a Chromecast is, then we can explain that as well. Just come and see my colleague, Mr. Walker. He'll explain that. So to wrap up, I think that mobile offers an opportunity to reduce the costs of authentication. This is a device somebody already has in their hands. You're using it for other things. It could be a personal device. It could be a work device. Yes, there's lots of caveats. We want to make sure we're managing devices securely. But you can use that to strengthen authentication. And as I've shown you, you can use that to automate business processes and make them much more secure and make them much more mobile. So now as a chief financial officer, as an IT manager, I can be approving things on my mobile device even when I'm out of the office. And I think that it can also strengthen security for a whole range of domains. So logical, logging into your IT systems, getting into your building in the morning, for cloud-based applications, and also to secure mobile applications themselves. So I think, yeah, mobile offers an opportunity to blend user experience and security like never before. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ian. Any questions from the audience? We've got a couple of minutes before the next session begins, so don't know if anyone has any questions. Yeah,
mine's a very low-tech question, I'm afraid. But
Perfect.
a very low-tech question. What consideration do you give to battery life with this type of program? Because I noticed on your slide there that device was using 1% for every minute that it was in action. So is it? Do you have
Which
consideration?
That was
You've got a slide. The couple of slides you had on there, and when the time versus the battery life was about a minute per 1%. So my question really is,
okay,
what consideration do you give to hungry battery life? And because many of us actually seem to have to spend quite a bit of our time managing batteries with some wonderful apps and devices, but I'm sure you guys are beating up the manufacturers for better lithium batteries, but do you help?
So this demo is recorded. I was just not brave enough to give a live demo. I don't think we use the battery that severely. Personally, I have to carry around one of these little battery packs that you plug your devices into to recharge them. An iPhone struggles to get through the whole day. The iPhone 6 is supposed to extend that. But yeah, there's a number of challenges. But yeah, I think as a as a information worker on the road a lot of the time, you need an external battery pack nowadays for mobile devices. I'm not sure as a provider of applications in that space, there's a lot we can do about that. Any suggestions, then let me know. I know iOS are improving the way in which you can monitor which applications are using your battery. So.
Any other final questions? Gentleman in the back.
I did make one interesting presentation. My comment would be is, if you use the banks as an example, banks are not very fast in, for example, using this sort of technology. They're quite happy with two-factor authentication. In fact, if you go to banks on the continent, they're still reliant upon other relatively old technology these days. How are you going to convince them? And so, to be honest, this is one of the problems you've got with management. They're going to turn around and say, right, two-factor authentication is probably okay. Why do I need to actually go to this new development, this new technology? And I'm not just quoting your presentation here. I'm talking about the whole issue in relation to our platform.
Well, I'm in IT sales, so that's my problem. Yeah. It's a problem for us. It's also a problem for UK government because they have the same conversations with managing directors of big public companies, and they say, do you realise how much of your intellectual property you're losing? And even at the executive board level, there isn't recognition of the real understanding of the risk, and then the investment to mitigate those risks. So I completely agree. I think all we can do as information security professionals is provide the best guidance we can in terms of, how do you mitigate against these identified risks based on the risks that are known about in the market. And I think malware is a very difficult one to mitigate against, which is why I used that as an example. But yeah, I mean, if there was a great way of pricing budget to solve these problems, then that helps. I think I was going to mention the Apple announcement and how that's better than passwords. So one thing that struck me about the Apple announcement, they're now doing mobile payments, so you can now pay if you're based in North America, not yet in the UK, but you can pay for a Subway or a McDonald's using your mobile phone. Don't know how many of you saw that. Was that something do you all try and look at live Apple streaming when they launch a new product, or is that just me? So you can now use your fingerprint and use Passbook on the iPhone and say, yep, I want to just pay using my credit card. Now, the interesting thing about that is that your phone doesn't actually give the merchant your credit card number. So that's really powerful. So whenever you buy something, let's just use the example of a restaurant rather than EMV. But if you're just giving your credit card to somebody to buy something, they can see your name, they can see your credit card number, the expiry date, everything they need to then go and use your credit card. Whereas with the Apple mechanism, they don't get that. They get a unique code for that purchase, which should be checked through MasterCard, Visa, and so on, which means that you're not actually giving them the thing they would need to use your credit card fraudulently. So that's a big step forward, because whenever you're providing the thing that's used to authenticate you, like your password, then we know that's a recipe for disaster, because any site that can get you to type that into the wrong place, they can then impersonate you, and they can then get access to your information or your money. So I'm not sure if... I think you raised a good point, and yeah, I've not got the answer. Otherwise, I'd be rich.
All right, one final show of hands. A round of applause, please, for Ian. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much.